Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. Our guest for today is Jesper Andersen, CEO at Infoblox. Now, Infoblox is the leader in the next generation domain name system management and security. Now, it's got about over 13,000 customers, 75% of which are Fortune 500 companies. Now, to tell us more about this, Jesper, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate you having me.
Now, Jesper, for a start, give us an overview of Infoblox and its history.
So Infoblox is a 23-year-old company founded in the United States. We are perhaps best known for a set of core networking services. One of the things I love about my job, I get to explain acronyms of acronyms. Not everyone understands what DDI stands for, and it's actually an acronym that stands for DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. Think of DNS as the phone book of the internet. That's where a computer will go to look up www.google.com and get its IP address so that, you know, a browser can talk to Google, right? Same thing for DHCP, which is our dynamic host communication protocol. That is how you get IP addresses on a network. And as you know, if you don't have an IP address, you can't do anything on a network. And when you do things like DHCP and manage IP addresses, and you do it, like you said, 75% of the largest companies in the world, they tend to have a lot of IP addresses. And that's where IPAM or IP address management comes in. So what Infoblox does, we are the market leader in helping companies around the world manage these essential networking services. In a modern digital world like today, if DNS or DHCP doesn't work, I like to tell my engineers, just to stress the criticality of what we do, people die if our products don't work. Because in modern healthcare, as an example, if a doctor can't pull up an electronic medical record for a patient, that patient can actually die. And that would be the case if DNS didn't work. So Infoblox, over 23 years, became the market leader in these essential core network services that a modern business very much relies on today.
And then how is the whole cybersecurity business weaved into this core business that you do?
Yeah, there are two ways to think about that, Brian. One is when you know everything that's on a network, like we do, and you know where those devices are going because it's a DNS query, then you have a lot of very useful information for cybersecurity specialists. They are people that we often say work in a SOC or an SOC, a security operations center, which incidentally is one of the harder jobs and frankly least favored jobs in the technology world today, because these people are stressed. There aren't enough of them. There are not enough available. There's a big imbalance between the supply and demand of these types of people, which is why we need to educate more of them. But what we can do is help make them more efficient, because they try to chase down potential events and risks on a network. That's their job, right? And when they do that with raw information, that's one thing. But when they do that with correlated information, that means when we can tell them, hey, it was this IP address that went to badguys.com, and it was this MAC address that was on this IP address. And by the way, it was in the finance department on the subnet that's in the finance department. That's very useful information for a security operations center team. So that's one way we help our customers today. We like to say that we make your other security solutions better by giving them the kind of information that makes those solutions useful. So not only do we provide the best network services, core network services, as I explained, we also allow you to use those from a cybersecurity perspective. And then the other thing we do is, it turned out that the cyber terrorists, unfortunately, are pretty smart and well-funded, as you know, and they understood that the world spent tens of millions of dollars in large companies on defending what we call the perimeter. That's where you hear about firewalls. from traditional firewall vendors like Checkpoint and Cisco to next generation firewall vendors like Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet. They do a very nice job of defending that perimeter, which is what we in technology call HTTP defenses and FTP and these fancy networking protocol words. Unfortunately, they don't do a very good job of defending against DNS. And so the cyber terrorists have learned that, and that's why over the last few years we have seen DNS become the most attacked network protocol on a network. It's one of the key vulnerabilities, and that's where Infoblox comes in. We can help defend that vulnerability. We are often that DNS server, and so it makes sense that we help defend that. So if your listeners and your viewers don't sleep well at night because they don't feel like they can really rely on DNS, maybe they have had downtime of DNS in the past, or if they are worried about vulnerabilities over DNS, and I would say if they're not, they should be, that's where a company like Infoblox can really help.
Okay, Jesper, I want to now zoom in on the cybersecurity landscape in the Asia Pacific region, because like everywhere else, particularly in the last 2 years, as you alluded to as well, cybersecurity has become front and center, top of mind for CIOs and C-suites across the region.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're in any sort of business. Now, give us an idea of the landscape in Asia, and what does the risk landscape look like?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a glass half full, glass half empty kind of situation, right? I would say on one hand, one of the unique, so there's no doubt that the digitization efforts in this part of the world is every bit as important as it is elsewhere in the world. I think that's a global phenomenon. Whatever industry you are in, if you do not have a digital platform, and if you don't have a digitization strategy as a business leader, then you are not going to be in business a few years from now, because your customer base, whether you are selling to consumers or other businesses or whatever industry you're in, they demand that they can access your services, buy your products from a digital platform. So you have to have it. The good news in this part of the world is many of your companies are younger and newer, and they don't have to deal with the same legacy technology that we often have to deal with in the Western world. Unfortunately, and that means they can do it right from the start and should do it right from the start. Unfortunately, the bad news is many of the organizations out here are not very well prepared to deal with cyber terrorism. So that's just the candid truth. There's a lot of data that underlines and supports that thesis. I think the region has been a little bit fortunate, especially in some of the maybe younger regions like Southeast Asia, as opposed to Japan and Korea and places like that, have been a little bit fortunate that the cyber terrorists feel that there's more money to be made, more gains to be made by attacking, big organizations in North America or in Western Europe or wherever. So we probably, even though there's lots of press and lots of news almost every week about companies getting compromised, unfortunately, in this part of the world, it probably hasn't been quite as prevalent and catastrophic as it has been for some companies in the Western world. I think that's only, frankly, because there were more gains to be had in the Western world. I think companies in this part of the world really need to invest more in cybersecurity. And listen, this is not just a technology problem. Companies like Infoblox can help all of the companies that are represented by your viewer base here, but it's also things like training, educating our employees in what it means to avoid phishing attacks, or nowadays the new term is smishing attacks, because they get sent by SMSs and social media and so on. So I think establishing a solid cybersecurity program, if companies don't have that today, there are lots of frameworks they can use to kind of base those things on. And that's certainly part of what I would advocate, that everyone that has a digital platform that's investing in digitization, security has to be, right front and center as part of that digitization effort.
One of the key challenges, Jesper, as you alluded to also when you were describing this, was the fact that the level of maturity in Asia is different. So you have countries like Japan, where even at an individual level, there is a very high awareness of the need to protect yourself against cyber criminals. Singapore, high level of maturity, but that maturity doesn't extend across the region in ASEAN, for example. There's different levels.
That's right.
And so this is where obviously the opportunities are for companies like yourself. How are you placed in the Asia Pacific regions? Where are you engaging customers?
Yeah, Infoblox has been in this part of the world for a very long time. I think we established our first office in ANZ in Sydney in 2009. Shortly thereafter, we established our Asia Pacific headquarters in Singapore in 2010, and that is where our headquarters is today. And today we have offices all over Asia, whether it's in Tokyo or it's in Seoul, Korea, or lots of people in India as an example. That's actually where we have the most of our employees as well. But here in Kuala Lumpur, where I am today, we have our ASEAN support center, and so we have a lot of support people here that can ensure that we can provide support in native languages around this part of the world. We have sales operations specialists here as well. So we are represented well across all of the region. We are in Hong Kong and Taiwan and Beijing. So we have good coverage, and we try to do everything we can to help this part of the world get educated on these technologies, both from a core networking and from a cybersecurity perspective as well.
Now, Jesper, one of the key challenges that we are seeing in the APAC region right now is the evolution in terms of complexity of attacks. So cyber attacks are becoming more sophisticated. Ransomware, which you alluded to earlier, which is very more common in the US and Europe, has come prime time to Asia. You look at instances in Singapore and instances in Australia, that's becoming more prevalent. What can we do as a CIO? If I'm wearing a CIO hat and I've got a regional operation, obviously I'm investing millions and millions of dollars to protect myself. What are some fundamentals that I need to think about and in order to protect myself and the company?
Yes, great question. I think the first thing you need to understand and think about is infrastructure, whether it's networking or compute or storage or anything, is integrally linked with security. And I'm old enough to remember, I've been in IT for a very long time. I'm old enough to remember when the infrastructure team, the networking team was in one building, the security team was in another building, and they barely spoke to each other. That's thankfully not the case anymore, right? They are more and more integrated. But the first thing a CIO should ask him or herself is, how well does my team work with the security team? Sometimes the chief information security officer reports into the CIO. Sometimes they are peers. Regardless of organizational structure, you cannot afford to think about any aspects of your digital platform, be it infrastructure or applications, without thinking about cybersecurity protection in every step of the way. You should never accept buying a DNS server without your vendor having a security solution that accompanies that DNS server. You should never accept extending your private data center out to a public cloud without considerations around what does that mean for security. You can never afford to accept remote workers without considering what does that do to my security architecture. People used to dial in, people used to come to the office all the time, and that was the primary place they worked from. A few people might have been working remote when they were traveling, and they would use VPN terminology. It stands for virtual private network technology, where you basically log in so that everything you do is happening on the data center on that side. That's not how people work anymore. And the pandemic accelerated that transformation with everyone working from home. And that has led to new security architectures like zero trust access and shift left and, detect and respond, all of those things. And they cannot be seen as separate from digitization and modernization of infrastructure initiatives. They go hand in hand. And so if I had one advice to the CIO listeners is, look yourself in the mirror and can you honestly say, yes, I am and we are considering security in every single decision we make around infrastructure, whether it's any of those parts of the IT stack that you have.
Now, Jesper, I want to get your insights in terms of a very critical issues that people never associate with cybersecurity: environmental, social, and governance issues. Could you kind of enlighten the audience in terms of how ESG plays a part with cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a big topic, Brian, right? Because ESG is a very big term, but I would say if you look at environmental aspects, that's perhaps more around ensuring that we use our resources in the right way. That's ensuring that we support, like Infoblox does the commitment to net zero initiatives we have as part of our ownership with Vista Equity Partners and Warburg Pincus Equity Partners, committed to zero carbon footprint by 2025. I think there are things like that you need to do. That also means when you start taking that seriously and looking at it, you start looking at office space, you start looking at how your offices are operating. And frankly, it's a demand from your employee base and increasing your customer base as well. And that has implications on your infrastructure and your cybersecurity. So they go hand in hand. On the social side, I would say that has a lot to do with our employees. What we are finding as we are hiring more younger people, they are not just coming for an attractive salary. They are coming because they want to work for a company that has purpose and that has a clear mission and that is committed to doing, in addition to making money for our shareholders, they are committed to doing what's right to do and to do good things, right? And this young generation, this young population want to work whenever they want to work and from wherever they want to work. And that leads to this change in cybersecurity architecture, like I talked about before. So again, they go hand in hand. And of course, the G in ESG around governance, I know is often used to the term around making sure that we are not just focused on shareholders, but on all stakeholders in a company, and that we govern ourselves in the right ethical kind of way. And again, you got to make sure that you consider cybersecurity aspects of that. Who has access to the information? Are you running the right governance structures? And so, they are used in the same thing. And I would say cybersecurity aspects of a business touches all aspects of ESG.
Now, looking ahead, Jesper, what's on the cards for Infoblox in 2023?
Yeah, I think that it's an exciting time. I wouldn't say I'm not worried on behalf of, I'm a world citizen. I travel around the world, and it's a little scary to look at some of the economical context that we live in, depending on where you are in the world. Certainly, the war in Ukraine is obviously horrifying for the poor people in Ukraine, but also, frankly, is destabilizing what I thought was a very good global type of world. Leaving all those things aside, Infoblox's mission is clear: to simplify networking and security. That's been our mission for our entire 23 years in business. And given what we talked about earlier, the continued focus on digital platforms for every business around the world, we have a very, very important role to help all of those organizations make sure that modern digital platform is reliable, that it is efficient. As I said, in a modern world today, no business can afford to have any downtime of that business, and that is what we do well. And so how we scale, leveraging our partner ecosystem, our growth in companies or in employees, Infoblox has grown a lot over the last few years because of the demand from all of these opportunities and challenges in the marketplace. So our job is to ensure that we can support our customers and prospects that want to be our customers with these sophisticated, high availability networking solutions that are inherently architected to be secure and to ensure that they can provide help around ensuring the cybersecurity defenses are in the best possible state for our customers.
Jesper, it's been a fascinating conversation. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, look, Brian, I appreciate you having me. It's been a great conversation. I hope I've been able to at least convey to your users the importance of having a digitization strategy. You must have that, right? And then ensuring that you have the right things in place, whether it's with Infoblox or there are lots of other great vendors and suppliers that can help you with those things. But think about the resiliency of that digital platform and think security first, right? Make sure that in every decision you make about IT, that you consider security to be a first-class citizen. That's part of those. That would be my leaving thought. I hope everyone takes like a look in the mirror and say, hey, are we really doing this well enough? Or are there things we should be doing around that we are not doing today? Whether it's on the process side, decision side, or on the technology side, where companies like Infoblox can help you.
Jesper, think security first is what we leave the audience with. Thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Jesper Andersen, the CEO at Infoblox, on Biztechasia Enterprise Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks for tuning in.